Okay.
Yes.
All right. Looks like it's good to go. Good morning. As you know, my name is Tom Fisher. I'm an attorney here on Guam, and I thank you for attending this press conference. As you know, we have filed a request, a petition for a writ of mandamus in the Superior Court. We did so this morning. It's probably, I'm sure it's available from the court. If anybody needs a copy of it, we'd be happy to provide it. Unfortunately, this petition for a writ is something we were forced to do. Officer Tapasnia, who is the petitioner in the case, had no other choice. The government of Guam, as well as the Attorney General's office, through an opinion, has made it crystal clear that they will not pay the double pay that is mandated by law. Now, they're taking different positions on it, and I'll tell you why we say it is mandated by law. I think it was about 1996 or so. Carl Gutierrez, then Governor Carl Gutierrez, through an executive order, promulgated the Department of Administration personnel rules and regulations. As such, they have the force of law. Now, if you look at 8.406A in that particular, I'll call it a law, but that personnel rule and regulation, it clearly states that in the case of an emergency, Gov Guam employees shall, not may, not will, but they shall be granted excused absence, not with pay, and not charged to leave. The practical effect of that is that when the governor declares an emergency, and there's no quibble about the fact that we are in an emergent situation, when the governor declares an emergency, Gov Guam goes home. That's what it says in A. These employees go home and are paid. Well, the legislature, the drafters, and Carl Gutierrez back then knew that there was a natural consequence of sending all of Gov Guam home. Obvious. We can't operate without police department. We can't operate without medical professionals. Those are just two easy examples. You know, not in any sense discounting what civil or child protective services do, or any of the other frontline workers. We don't mean to discount that. But it is crystal clear that Gov Guam gets sent home in an emergency, and then the authorities call back essential personnel. So procedurally, Gov Guam gets sent home. That includes police officers, and at the very same time, the police officers are called back to work and are entitled to double pay. That is clear, absolutely clear from the statute. It's confounding to us why the Attorney General issued an opinion that is frankly lazy and not well thought out. They did not even address 8.406A. When you look at something like that, it appears that the opinion that Attorney General Camacho put out is agenda-driven more than anything else, was looking for a result and said, let's drive down this road and get that result. It happens to be contrary to law. Now, as you know, in the last, I guess, 48 hours, 24 hours, I think at least 3 different pieces of legislation have been introduced in the Guam legislature. And I'd like to briefly comment on them, if I may. Talina Nelson, for example, has put out 2 separate bills, and commend Talina Nelson for doing that, because what she was doing was acting on the best impulse, probably, and you know, trying to get these people awarded money. And so we have to take your hat off to her for doing so, but it's unnecessary. The law already provides the cure. Now, I hate to say it, but I can't be so generous with the bill that Senator Munya Barnes introduced, which GFT unfortunately endorsed. They have, and I think it's kind of cynical, I wrote down the note, they've called it the Heroes Annual Leave Bill. Well, okay, we're going to call these people heroes, but we're going to pick their pocket, essentially is what's going on. It's a swindle. That bill caps what happens if you come into work. You get annual leave not to exceed 240 hours. Excuse me, just a moment.
We need to record because they can't record on their end.
Okay, I was just informed we're having a bit of a technical difficulty. We're trying to fix it. It seems that I guess one or more of you are having trouble recording this. Okay, can I just go ahead and continue? Yes. Okay. All right. So what essentially is going on is they have capped the amount of leave you can receive for participating or working during this particular emergency. Now, many people, many men and women have worked more than 240 hours, yet this bill cuts them off at 240 hours. And even worse, frankly, you can get cash, but you can only get cash up to 120 of those hours, and you've essentially going to have to ask to get reimbursed for the leave. It doesn't say it shall be reimbursed, it says it may be reimbursed. And then any hour, whether it be 1 or 100, above 240 hours, the employee is just going to have to eat. They gave that labor for free, and GovGuam is not going to compensate for it, even though they are required to do so by law. So, you know, hats off to Talina Nelson, but this other bill, well, I just hope it goes nowhere. Now, I did close this opening statement by addressing the fact that the Guam Federation of Teachers has essentially laid down their arms and surrendered. They've got, I don't know, I'm sure several hundred members. It's not clear to me that Mr. Koss even consulted with them before he, you know, hoisted the white flag here. Those people who are members of GFT are entitled to adequate representation by their union, and they're not getting it. They are entitled to double pay. The law is clear on that, and this is no time to fold your tent and walk away. Okay. Anyway, that's my opening speech, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Just FYI, Tom, if you can hear me, GFT just issued a release reversing their position. They now support Bill 357, Talina's bill. Okay.
All right. It doesn't surprise me. I'm sure that Mr. Koss has been getting every sort of all the heat you can imagine. Again, as to Talina's bill, you know, good honor, but it's not necessary. And you know, there's a tremendous drawback to passing these standalone bills, Kevin, to provide for this compensation. Because what about the actual personnel rule? What are we going to do during a typhoon? What are we going to do during another position or another horrendous situation in which these people, these employees are putting themselves at risk? What are we going to do then? Is the governor or the attorney general going to fall back on this original position and not compensate? The law provides for compensation. Talina's bill is unnecessary. Tina's bill, Senator Barnes, is unnecessary as well.
And so, Tom, Nick Delgado with the Guam Daily Post. So aside from Officer Tapasnia, who has come forward and essentially sparked this lawsuit, have others since come on as well? And can you say how many and from what agencies?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. You know, the pleading is it's Officer Tapasnia and Does 1 through 100. So as more come forward, of course we can identify them. And I will tell you quite frankly that we are definitely looking in to the possibility of asking the court to certify a class of plaintiffs in a class action.
If I could, so the Attorney General, whenever he had issued an opinion on the double pay for essential, you know, government of Guam employees working during the COVID-19 crisis, he had said, according to the rule, that there were 3 elements that were needing to be met, that including that it was determined a state of emergency, the facility was closed, and that the personnel were still subject to work and respond. And we know that with GPD, some of the precincts were closed. However, they were still on duty and hours were clocked with that. So as far as you say, that's an argument, then that's they're standing then from based off of what the AG's opinion, especially for GPD.
Well, I think the AG's opinion addressed GMH. I'd like to, and thank you for bringing that up, Adriana, because I'd like to also mention that the personnel rules and regulations for the Guam Memorial Hospital are identical. So this also covers nurses, and it also covers doctors. But to address your original question, Yes, you're quite correct. That is what the AG said, and they only addressed 8.406C. They completely ignored A, which says in an emergency, Gov Guam is granted an excused absence, not administrative leave, none of that, excused absence with pay, not chargeable to leave. So the function of that is, and that's the law. That's the law. We're not free to just ignore it. The function of that is when Governor Leon Guerrero declared a state of public health emergency, Gov Guam was functionally sent home with pay. All of Gov Guam, GPD, GMH, you name it. And of course, that's impractical. We can't operate without a police force. We can't operate without a hospital. So at the very same time, the authorities for these divisions called officers, nurses, doctors back to work, which was appropriate. But they were required under 8.406C to pay these people double time. So for the AG to simply say that no, the hospital wasn't closed, they were operating, entirely ignores the reality of the situation, and it ignores the law.
Yeah, and repeatedly, both the governor's office and the AG, after that issuance of that opinion, said that this isn't the same as what we've seen when it comes to a typhoon. And so with the governor saying that, for one, initially that they just don't have the funds, they don't have enough money to pay before these bills were proposed, and then saying that she's using her authority during this public health emergency to move forward with the differential pay versus having to pay the money they don't have for the double pay. How strong do you believe that your case is for this lawsuit for double pay, Tom?
Very strong. I understand that that's the governor's position, that she and the AG are finding it inconvenient to do what the law requires, but they have no discretion. The law requires this. These people are putting it out there. We call them frontliners for a reason. These guys are out there these guys and ladies are out there dealing with sometimes very difficult populations, populations which may be more vulnerable to something like COVID-19. They are being potentially exposed to this virus. And then they're also, imagine the stress that causes an officer who has to return to her home after working for 12 days. And she's got the children at home and grandparents. And now she's petrified that if she contracted the virus, she may be spreading it to her family. And if the governor and the AG think that sort of bravery is cannot be compensated, then I just don't understand that line of thinking. These people are out there on the front line. Pay them. The law says so.
I just want to go back to something you had touched on briefly, but you said that I wanted to ask a little further on your take on GFT's lawsuit, which is currently on hold at the moment. And they had said that they came out yesterday during the governor's daily press briefing, and at the time we're in support of the measures for compensation paid, but as we know, it hasn't been signed into law. And now today we're seeing you filing this lawsuit representing one client, which is a GPD personnel. And with GFT, there was 400 petitioners that signed that, and a majority of them, according to GFT, they said were GPD officers. So what is your opinion and your legal opinion on that lawsuit? Well, not moving right now.
Well, okay, so there is no lawsuit, but well, from GFT, but they say they're thinking about it. I'll just have to take their word on it. But I'm sorry, you said that 400 people had signed some sort of a petition?
Yeah, that there was, whenever we had spoke with GFT, there were about 400 signatures, and majority of them were GPD officers.
Okay, and I don't know the nature of the petition, but you know, that's fine. They can sign what they want, but they were not allowed to discount other people's right to money. You know, I keep coming back to it. This is the law. The law has to be available. So GFT has no lawsuit. I'm unaware of a petition. You know, I'm glad people are taking a position on this, of course. But the point is, as to these bills, I guess we're talking about these three bills from Senator Nelson and Senator Barnes, they're absolutely unnecessary. And as to Senator Barnes, it's taking money out of people's pockets. That's all it's doing.
Attorney Fisher, you mentioned that this writ will cut through barriers of form and procedure. Does something like this have to go through CSC? Do you need to exhaust those administrative remedies for the court to hear this?
Okay, and that's who am I speaking to, please? I don't see.
Sorry, this is Jasmine with the PDN.
Oh, hi. Good morning, Jasmine.
Morning, Ted.
You're basically asking a question of whether or not we need to exhaust administrative remedies in this situation by going to the Civil Service Commission. I think
Right.
on first blush, it looks like it is a grievance, but the grievance, if it can be, won't use that as a term of art, because we are asking for a writ. We are representing to the court, and it's true that we don't have a remedy available to us with the Civil Service Commission. The reason we don't is if we file with the Civil Service Commission, we're going to be here till next Christmas. And the Civil Service Commission is going to set a hearing on this, 2 years from now. They've got their docket is unbelievably crowded. We don't have a plain remedy. We don't have a speedy remedy. We don't have a clear remedy except to go to court. And so because of these requirements, or because of these principles of obtaining a writ, we have essentially exhausted administrative remedies.
Thank you. And the AG said last week that they asked DOA for paperwork of any other line agency employee getting double pay for any past public health emergencies. They said DOA didn't have that documentation. Does that play a factor at all in this petition?
Okay, I'm having a little trouble understanding. You said that DOA says that they have not received some paperwork?
Oh, DOA, basically the AG said that no other line employee agency had been paid double pay before.
Okay.
Is that a factor at all in this petition?
Well, I don't think so. What were the circumstances of the double pay being awarded? Was it because of 8.406C? If
Yeah,
so,
my understanding is that it hasn't. They haven't paid anyone double pay under that rule.
Well, they need to. They need to. I understand that that's the AG's position, but as I said earlier, it looks like the decision was agenda driven. They saw a result they wanted and went for it. And unfortunately, the people who were left behind are all the folks who were out there during this public health emergency. All these people who were working during the public health emergency and were entitled to the pay are not getting it.
Do you feel that the fact that autonomous agencies have paid out double pay will bolster your lawsuit and the petition?
Could. It seems to be that if the government of Guam has made payment, double pay, that seems to indicate that the government of Guam understands our position and frankly agrees with us. We're just going to have to see how this thing unrolls. I'm not even, honestly, when we were doing this, I was pondering whether or not the government of Guam is even going to oppose this. Doesn't seem like it doesn't seem a sensible position. And why would the government of Guam take a position adverse to their own employees? Well, I just don't think that is a viable position. Listen, we can't steal labor. If people work, we got to pay them. That's the contract. If people work under situations that are dangerous to life and limb and their families, we promised them we would pay them double. We need to do that. That was the word we gave these people. We're not going to give them a haircut by lopping 120 hours or whatever off the top of what they can recover. We're certainly not going to do that. And that's Senator Munya Barnes's bill. We're not going to make them stand in line to get a lump sum payment on 120 hours of leave. And you got to understand, there are many people in government of Guam who have worked 300, 400 hours during this COVID emergency. They're entitled to get paid, and we're not going to make them stand in line on the off chance that the government says, well, it's not a GovGuam payday, so we might be able to pay you this time. And the months go by. And a year goes by, and these guys have seen nothing. It's not going to happen. What we are doing with this writ is we are asking a judge of the Superior Court to order the government of Guam to follow the law. It's really that simple. All right, if nobody has any further questions, well, I'd be happy to entertain them, but if not, again, thank you very much. I appreciate you all attending.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Attorney
Thank
Fisher. We
you.
look forward to seeing how this all plays out and whenever dates will be scheduled in court to hear